My name is Nina Foster. I am 32 years old. On Christmas Eve in Phoenix, with cinnamon candles burning and my mom fussing over the ham, my 11-year-old son Ethan walked into my parents' living room with a yellowed bruise blooming under his right eye. My nephew, 14-year-old Zane, lounged on the arm of the sofa in his designer hoodie, smirking as he popped a piece of fudge into his mouth. Guess he finally learned his lesson. He muttered just loud enough for me to hear. My dad chuckled like it was a joke, and my older sister Clara tightened her grip on her wine glass without looking at me. The room was all twinkle lights and fake cheer until I stepped closer to Ethan and felt my stomach drop. If you've ever sat at a holiday table where everything looked perfect while something ugly pulsed underneath, I'd really like to hear from you. Where are you watching from? And what would you have done if this was your kid standing there? I bent down, trying to keep my voice steady. Ethan, honey, what happened to your face? He flinched his fingers, twisting the hem of his sweater, eyes flicking to Clara and then to my parents by the tree. It was nothing, Mom, he mumbled. We were just playing. Clara finally met my eyes, her smile a size too tight. They were shooting hoops at the park earlier, she said, shrugging. He took a charge and hit the pavement. You know, boys. Her tone sounded rehearsed, like she'd practiced it on the drive over. Zane rolled his eyes at Ethan, smug and unbothered. Our neighbor Logan Pierce, who had stopped by with his girlfriend to drop off homemade tamales, went awkwardly quiet beside the doorway, like he'd just walked into a scene he wasn't supposed to see. Ethan's eyes filled, and before I could press him again, he whispered something that sliced straight through the Christmas music. Why did you let him? He asked, staring at Clara. Her wine glass slipped from her hand, shattered on the tile, and the whole room froze. The sound of glass on tile yanked me back 1 week to a different kind of crash. It was the previous Friday night at Desert Vista Stays, the little short-term rental company I had scraped together from one beat-up duplex and a whole lot of overtime shifts. I'd driven over to drop fresh towels at our newest bungalow, the one with the cactus mural guests loved for Instagram. The winter air was cool by Phoenix standards, just a thin bite after sunset, and I was juggling laundry baskets when I heard Clara's voice cutting through the parking lot by the dumpsters. I slowed, staying out of sight behind a stucco wall. Dad is talking about putting Ethan on the paperwork, she was saying, low and angry. Like Desert Vista is somehow hers to hand to him when he's older. I heard her husband Trevor on speaker, his voice faint but sharp. You're the one who knows business, he said. You manage bookings, you talk to the agents. If Alan's going to leave anything, it should go toward Zane, not her kid. I pressed my back against the wall laundry, digging into my hip, listening as my sister sliced through my future like it was a spreadsheet. It's not fair, she hissed. She got that down payment because Dad co-signed and Mom watched Ethan for free, and now she acts like she built an empire. If Ethan grows up thinking those houses are his, he'll never understand what it means to work. Maybe he needs to feel what responsibility really looks like. The truth was, I had emptied my savings, taken a terrifying adjustable rate loan, and driven Uber between turnovers to make Desert Vista Stays real. My parents had helped, but not the way Clara liked to frame it. Trevor's voice dropped lower. Then you control it before it's too late, he said. He's just a kid. Kids can be corrected. Clara's reply was colder than the air. Yeah, I know. I'll make sure he understands his place. A car door slammed nearby, and I jerked back, heart pounding, as she ended the call and walked toward the units, oblivious to me standing in the shadows with a head full of alarm bells. For years, my family had acted like Clara was the one destined to run everything important. She was the polished one, the real estate agent with glossy headshots and a confident laugh, the daughter my parents bragged about to their friends at church. I was the younger sister who got pregnant in college, who worked front desks and call centers after Ethan's dad took off, who dared to buy a beat-up duplex off Indian School Road and turn it into something profitable. When Zane shoved another kid at a barbecue, my parents called him spirited, their mouths soft with fondness. When Ethan preferred books and coding tutorials on his tablet to tackle football, They shook their heads and said he was too sensitive. A month before Christmas, my mom had asked Zane to help Ethan carry linens to my car, and he snapped, "He's not my employee," loud enough for everyone to hear. Clara laughed, but her eyes lingered on Ethan with this strange calculation that made my skin crawl. Even Logan had once knocked on my door late at night to ask if everything was okay, because he'd heard yelling by the bungalows. I'd brushed it off as rowdy guests. Now, watching Ethan's bruise under the tree lights, I wondered what else I had ignored. The Monday before Christmas, the school counselor called during my lunch break while I was answering booking messages. "Ms. Foster, this is Dr. Marissa Boyd from Jefferson Middle." She said, her voice calm but serious. Ethan had a rough morning. He froze during a group project, started shaking, and told his teacher he didn't want to see his cousin anymore. My heart sank. Did he say why I asked? There was a pause, the kind that says there's more, but policy is in the way. He said they were just playing rough, and that it was his fault, she explained, but the way he said it didn't sit right. "I can't force him to talk, but I wanted you to know. Keep an eye on him, okay?" I thanked her, staring at the blinking cursor on my booking calendar. I told myself maybe it was about a video game argument or some teenage sarcasm gone wrong, but her words clung to me all week. By the time my parents insisted we do Christmas like normal, the knot in my chest had hardened into something I couldn't ignore. Back in my parents' living room, the glass was barely swept when Clara tried to reset the scene. "Ethan, tell your grandparents it was just basketball," she said, stooping to pick up shards as my mom rushed in with a dish towel. "You tripped, remember?" Ethan's shoulders rose up around his ears and he gave the tiniest shake of his head. My dad shot me a warning look over the rim of his eggnog. "Nina, let's not ruin the evening," he said. "The turkey is almost ready. Boys get bruises. It's part of growing up." The tree lights blinked cheerfully while the air got heavy. Logan shifted his weight and cleared his throat. "I should probably get going," he murmured, squeezing my shoulder on his way out. His eyes flicked between Ethan's bruise and Zane's smirk, and I could tell he saw what my parents refused to see. Clara forced a laugh. "We'll talk later," she hissed at me. "Don't start something in front of everyone." I'd spent my entire life swallowing things so we wouldn't make a scene, but seeing my son standing there scared and silent, something in me finally snapped. We sat down to dinner anyway, because my mom insisted the food would get cold, and we can't upset your father's sugar levels with more drama. The table was crowded with green bean casserole, mashed potatoes, and the kind of store-bought rolls my dad swore tasted like childhood. Ethan picked at his plate, the bruise under his eye more obvious in the chandelier light. Zane ate like a king, tossing out little comments that didn't quite qualify as jokes, just barbs in disguise. At one point, he leaned toward Ethan and muttered, "Maybe if you weren't such a baby, you'd be ready for real work." I slammed my fork down. "What work exactly?" I asked, my voice sharper than the carving knife. Clara waved it off. "He just means helping more with the rental," she said. "Dad and I have been talking about Ethan learning responsibility if everything is being left to him, right?" "Dad." My dad cleared his throat, suddenly fascinated by the gravy boat. Clara's phone lit beside her plate. "Did you tell her yet?" The sender was just a number. Her jaw clenched as she flipped it, face down, eyes avoiding mine. The more they tried to smooth things over, the more Ethan seemed to shrink into his chair. My mom launched into a story about the early days of my grandparents' tiny motel in Flagstaff, how family pulled together and nobody complained about a few bumps and bruises. I barely heard her. My gaze kept drifting to Ethan's trembling hands and Zane's restless tapping foot. When dessert came out, my mom insisted on a group photo by the tree. "Come on, big smiles," she chirped, positioning us like cardboard cutouts. Ethan hesitated, angling his body away from Zane, and that cold certainty settled over me that whatever had happened before we got here was not a simple fall. As my dad fiddled with the phone timer, I leaned toward Ethan. "We're talking about this after," I whispered. His eyes filled again, and he gave another tiny nod. When Zane snorted, "Don't be dramatic, Aunt Nina." Ethan turned to Clara, voice barely audible but cutting through the noise. You said he could, he whispered. You watched. That was the second time glass slipped from her hand and Christmas shattered. After my mom shooed everyone out of the broken glass zone and insisted we finish dessert like civilized people, the evening limped forward. Wrapping paper crinkled underfoot, the TV hummed with some old holiday movie. Nobody was really watching, and the smell of pine started to make me nauseous. Okay? I said finally, standing in the middle of the living room. We're not letting this go. My mom looked up from stacking plates. Nina, not tonight? She pleaded. Your father is tired. Ethan hovered near the hallway, torn between wanting to disappear and wanting to hear what would happen. Clara sank deeper into the couch, swirling fresh wine. There's nothing to talk about, she snapped. They were playing. He fell. End of story. My dad's voice came out low and final. She's right. We don't air family problems at Christmas. Let's be smart about this. For them, smart had always meant quiet. My best friend and assistant Kelsey Hart had stayed to help my mom clean up because she knew my parents always roped me into kitchen duty. She froze in the doorway, now holding a stack of dessert plates, her eyes flicking between me and Ethan. Actually, she said quietly, Nina, I need to tell you something. Everyone turned toward her like she'd flipped on a spotlight. Kelsey swallowed. Last week I was dropping off supplies at the bungalows, she said. I heard Ethan crying near the storage unit, and I'm pretty sure I heard Zane's voice too. By the time I got over there, they were gone. I didn't want to assume, but it didn't sound like kids joking. My mom's lips pressed into a thin line. You should have come to us instead of making it sound like an ambush, she said, icy. Boys argue. That doesn't make it abuse. Clara shot to her feet, cheeks flushed. You're all being ridiculous, she snapped. Ethan picks fights and then plays victim. Zane is a teenager. He needs to let off steam. And you, she jabbed a finger at me, have always babied him. Something that had been bending inside me for 3 decades finally refused to bend. My son is not your punching bag to teach responsibility. I said, my voice steady, even though my hands shook. He's also not your backup retirement plan or a pawn in whatever power game you're playing with the rentals. My dad's face darkened. Watch your tone, he warned. Your mother and I invested a lot in Desert Vista. You wouldn't have those properties if we hadn't co-signed and loaned you money when no bank would touch you. This business is our family's reputation in Phoenix. If people hear we can't even manage our own house, what do you think that does to bookings? There it was, as neat as the holidays spread, my son's bruised face on one side, online reviews and gossip on the other, and they still wanted me to pretend the scale was balanced. Ethan's breath hitched behind me. Kelsey set the plates down with a soft clatter, jaw tight. I thought of Dr. Boyd's concerned voice and realized I might be the only adult in that room willing to put Ethan first. Then I remembered the one witness nobody in that living room was counting on: the cameras. After a minor break-in scare the previous summer, I had installed security cameras around the bungalows, the parking lot, the back alley by the storage unit, the carport where guests liked to sneak smoke breaks. At the time, it was for insurance and peace of mind. Now it was a lifeline. Fine, I said. If it was just a fall, the cameras will show that, right? For a split second, Clara went pale before she forced a scoff. You're really going to drag us into that, she said. Be my guest. Waste your time. My dad muttered something about trust and paranoia, but I was already grabbing my phone. Ethan, go sit in the den for a minute, I told him. Kelsey, stay with him. My mom started to protest, but Kelsey had already guided Ethan away, whispering something I couldn't hear. I stepped into my parents' small office, closed the door, opened the security app, and scrolled to last week's footage with my heart in my throat. The grainy video loaded, slowly jumping to life with a view of the cracked asphalt behind the bungalows, the desert sky fading to purple in the background. I fast-forwarded through a delivery truck, a couple checking in with suitcases, and then my thumb stopped. Ethan, small and hunched, stood by the storage unit, his shoulders curled inward. Zane strode into frame, taller, swaggering, blocking the exit like he owned the place. I turned the volume up and heard just enough. You think these houses are yours? Zane snarled. Grandpa said Mom's the one who makes the money. You're just some charity case. Ethan shook his head, barely audible. I never said they were mine. A third figure appeared at the edge of the frame, Clara arms crossed watching. Maybe he needs a reminder of who actually does the work, she said, her voice cool. Go ahead, Zane. He needs to toughen up. Zane shoved Ethan hard in the chest. Ethan stumbled backward, his foot catching the lip of the concrete, and went down the side of his face, cracking against the edge. He curled in on himself, hands over his head, as Zane kicked dirt toward him. Clara didn't move. I paused the video, my hands shaking so badly I almost dropped the phone. My sister had stood there and let her son hurt mine over a business neither of their names were on. For a moment, I just stared at Clara's frozen figure on the screen, the casual tilt of her head, the way she looked almost satisfied. That snapped me out of it. I walked back to the den and motioned for Ethan to join me alone in the office. He came in, eyes wary. I knelt so we were eye level. Ethan, I said softly. I saw the cameras from the bungalows. I saw what Zane did. I saw that Aunt Clara was there. His face crumpled, tears spilling over. She told him to, he whispered. She said, you act like everything is yours and that I need to remember it all belongs to the family and to Zane someday. She said if I told you, nobody would believe me because you always overreact. My throat tightened. Why didn't you tell me at school when Dr. Boyd asked? He wiped his nose on his sleeve. I didn't want to make things worse, he said. And I thought, maybe she was right. I pulled him into a hug and held him until his breathing slowed. You didn't do anything wrong, I said into his hair. They did. And I'm going to fix it. When we walked back into the living room, everyone was still where I'd left them, only more brittle. Clara paced, her phone clutched in her hand, while my mom whispered with my dad on the couch. Kelsey hovered by the doorway, ready if I needed her. I stood in front of the TV and cast the video to the screen, turning the volume up high enough that even my dad's selective hearing couldn't miss a word. The scene unfolded. Zane's shove, Ethan's fall, Clara's cold little nod. The room went dead quiet except for Ethan's faint whimper on the recording. My mom's hand flew to her mouth. My dad swore under his breath. Clara's eyes went wide, then narrowed. It is not what it looks like, she blurted. He was just horsing around. I didn't think he'd actually fall like that, and I certainly didn't tell him to hurt Ethan. You're twisting it. I rewound the clip and let her own words play again. Go ahead, Zane. He needs to toughen up. This time even my dad flinched. Clara, he said, voice strained, that doesn't sound good. Their first instinct still wasn't what any decent grandparents should have been. My mom went straight to damage control. We cannot let this get out, she said, turning to me with a look that bordered on pleading. Desert Vista is booked solid through spring. If guests or neighbors hear there was some kind of incident on the property, we will be ruined. People talk in this town, Nina. You know that. My dad nodded, slow and grim. We handle this inside the family, he insisted. You delete that footage, we make sure Zane understands it was a mistake, and we move on. No need to drag social workers or courts into it. Ethan stood behind me, every muscle tense. I could feel his eyes on the back of my neck, waiting to see whether I would protect him or cave, like I always had when they pulled the reputation card. Clara crossed her arms, emboldened. If you blow this up, you're the one destroying what you built, she said. Not me. You think guests will want to stay at Abuse Vista stays. The fact she could say that in front of the child who'd been on the ground in that video told me everything I needed to know. No, I said the word heavier than any I'd spoken that night. The person who destroyed anything is the one who stood there and watched her kid assault mine over a business that doesn't even belong to her. And the parents who backed her because they care more about star ratings than their grandson's face. I am done playing along. I turned to Clara first. Effective immediately, you are out of Desert Vista stays, I said. You will not handle bookings, talk to guests, or step foot on the properties in any professional capacity. I'm changing locks and passwords this week. You will return the spare keys and the company card tomorrow." She stared at me like I'd slapped her. "You can't do that," she sputtered. "Dad and Mom invested. I brought in clients. Zane has been helping with yard work. This is our future." My dad shot up from his seat. "She's right," he snapped. "We helped with the second bungalow's down payment. You don't get to cut us out like hired help." I nodded slowly. "You co-signed one loan and fronted money for appliances," I said. "I've repaid every cent with interest. The LLC is in my name. I invited you in. I can uninvite you." And I just did. The next part was the hardest because it meant saying out loud what I'd already decided in that office while Ethan cried in my arms. "Tomorrow, I'm calling Dr. Boyd," I said. "I'm going to send her this video and tell her what Ethan told me. She's a mandated reporter. That means this doesn't get buried in our living room. If child protection or the police decide to follow up, that's on them. I won't interfere either way." My mom's face drained of color. "You want to put your own nephew in the system," she whispered as if I'd announced I was sending him to prison. "You would do that to family." I shook my head. "I'm not doing anything to Zane," I said. "You did this to him by raising him to think he can hurt people, and you'll cover for him. Clara did this by turning him into her enforcer. I am doing something for Ethan, so he knows at least one adult will stand up for him." Clara took a step toward me, voice low and furious. "You're going to regret this," she said. "When Desert Vista is dragged through an investigation and you lose bookings, don't come crying to us." Kelsey moved subtly between us, her body language protective. "She won't," Kelsey said quietly. "She has people who actually care about her and Ethan." The following week moved in a blur, but not the kind where things magically resolved. Every step had weight. I met with Dr. Boyd at the school, sitting in a small office lined with posters about coping skills, while Ethan worked on a puzzle down the hall. I showed her the video and repeated what Ethan had told me. She watched carefully, then nodded, already pulling out a notepad. "I have to report this to the county," she said. "Because of Clara's role in encouraging it and because there's a pattern of fear." "You understand," I said yes, even though my stomach knotted. A caseworker called 2 days later to clarify details: where it happened, who lived where, how often Ethan saw Zane. They scheduled interviews, one with Ethan at school, one with me at home, separate visits with Clara's family. I told the truth every time. Meanwhile, I filed paperwork with the state to update Desert Vista Stay's operating agreement, naming Ethan as the eventual beneficiary and officially removing Clara from anything legal. Kelsey spent evenings at my kitchen table helping me sort passwords, contact guests, and draft new house rules. Logan, who turned out to be a handyman between construction gigs, changed the locks and installed an extra camera by the side gate. By early spring, the sign on the original duplex changed, too. Logan climbed a ladder and bolted a simple new one above the front gate: "Ethan's Desert Retreats," in warm copper letters that glowed in the Arizona sun. We updated the website, leaning into the idea of a small family-run business that actually prioritized safety. Reviews stayed strong. Most guests cared more about clean sheets and honest communication than the rumors my relatives tried to spread. The county investigation didn't end with anyone in handcuffs, but it didn't vanish either. In the end, Zane was ordered into mandatory counseling and Clara had to attend parenting classes. He was barred from unsupervised contact with younger kids, including Ethan, until a caseworker signed off. Clara raged about overreach, but for once she had to answer to someone other than my parents. At the same time, her real estate career started to wobble. Phoenix is big, but her circles weren't. A colleague whispered about that CPS thing, and within a month, she was quietly dropped from 2 high-profile listings. My mom called more than once to tell me I'd ruined Clara's prospects. Every time I reminded her who had been on the ground in that video. While their world shrank, mine shifted but did not collapse like they predicted. A few local guests canceled when Clara's friends started half-true threads on Facebook, but most of our bookings came from visitors who just wanted a safe, comfortable place to sleep. Kelsey became my unofficial co-manager handling inventory and training cleaning crews. Logan signed on as our go-to maintenance guy fixing leaks and repainting scuffed walls. By summer, Ethan was sleeping through the night again. He still tensed when he saw boys roughhousing at the park, but he also started helping Kelsey check guests in proudly explaining smart lock codes and showing people how to work the TV remotes. Dr. Boyd kept checking in, not just as a reporter now, but as another steady adult in his life. She suggested we channel his love of tech into something positive, so we let him redesign the guest guide using a simple website builder. He added his own tips for ice cream spots and quiet corners at the Science Center. Reviews began mentioning the owner's son and how kind he was. Meanwhile, the space between me and my parents grew into something wide and unbridgeable. They chose Clara again and again. They insisted what she'd done was just a parenting misstep and that I owed her forgiveness for one bad moment. They refused to accept that a bruise on a child's face and a video of an adult encouraging it was abuse. When they realized I meant it about boundaries, that I wasn't bringing Ethan to Sunday dinners, wasn't inviting them to the properties, wasn't available for quick errands, their calls slid from guilt trips into angry voicemails. They accused me of tearing the family apart, of poisoning Ethan, against his grandparents, of being dramatic. I saved none of it. If they wanted to see who had really split this family, all they had to do was watch that footage. I stopped answering unknown numbers. I told Ethan he never had to pick up a call from them if he didn't want to. He didn't. A year later, Christmas didn't happen at my parents' house. It happened at our original duplex, now the coziest version of itself, string lights across the courtyard, a small artificial tree in the living room, a folding table covered in tamales from Logan's mom and cookies Kelsey baked from some recipe she'd found online. Phoenix winters are mild, so we set up patio heaters and let the kids run around outside in sweaters instead of coats. I blocked off the guest calendar so we could host an open house for friends, neighbors, and the little found family that had formed around us. Dr. Boyd came by with her spouse bringing a board game for Ethan and a poinsettia. She joked she was determined not to kill. Kelsey teased Ethan about being the boss as he showed kids from the building how to decorate gingerbread houses on the kitchen counter. Logan tuned a beat-up guitar on the patio, ready to lead a goofy sing-along. There were no lectures about keeping up appearances, no scanning the room to see who might be judging. Just people who chose to be there. Halfway through the evening, when the house was full of laughter and the smell of hot chocolate, my phone buzzed with a notification from the front gate camera. A delivery driver stood there holding a small padded envelope with my name on it. I signed for it and carried it back inside. "Package, Mom?" Ethan asked, licking frosting off his finger. "Looks like it," I said, turning it over. The return address made my stomach clench. Clara Briggs, with the suburban development my parents had helped her buy into. For a second, the noise in the room seemed to fade, even though no one had actually stopped talking. I handed the envelope to Ethan. "It's addressed to both of us," I said. "You decide what we do with it." He carefully opened the flap, pulled out a folded letter, and read silently. I watched his eyes move across the page, watched his jaw tighten. After a few lines, he looked up at me and then slowly tore the paper in half. Then he ripped it again and again, until all that was left were little pieces on the floor. "She says she's sorry," he said quietly. "She says she didn't mean to let things go that far and that we should remember we're family. But I remember how it felt. I don't want them back." I bent down and helped him scoop the scraps into the trash. I'd seen enough words to know the rest. Something about one mistake, something about Dad's health, something about how I was holding a grudge. There was no mention of the nights Ethan couldn't sleep, of the county meetings, of the way Zane had glared at my kid in the grocery store before we rearranged our routines to avoid them. There was certainly no acknowledgement that they had tried to bully an 11-year-old into accepting that he was less deserving of safety because his mom had been the one to build something. I straightened and looked around at the rented unit that had become our base. Kelsey caught my eye and raised her gingerbread cookie in a little salute. Logan launched into an off-key version of Jingle Bell Rock, making the kids squeal with laughter. Dr. Boyd smiled from the corner, watching Ethan move easily between adults and children, confident in a way I hadn't seen 2 Christmases ago. In the months since I cut my parents and sister out, I'd heard bits and pieces about their lives. Clara lost her spot at her old brokerage and bounced between smaller offices, none of which gave her the prestige she craved. The subdivision she lived in quietly stopped asking her to head committees once whispers about that CPS thing spread, and she hated being on the outside of the social ladder she'd once climbed so easily. My parents helped cover her legal fees and therapy copays, tapping into money they'd earmarked for a retirement RV. Eventually, they sold their house and moved into a smaller condo closer to Clara so they could support her, which mostly meant enabling the same mindset that had gotten them there in the first place. They tried to reach me through mutual acquaintances, through new email addresses, even once through a card left on Logan's windshield. I didn't respond. The county closed the case with clear conditions. Zane could not be left alone with younger relatives, including Ethan, and any new incident would mean more serious consequences. That was between them and the state. It no longer involved us. Standing in that little living room decked out in mismatched Christmas lights, I realized I finally believed something I'd told myself for years but never really lived. Family is not defined by shared DNA or who got which title in the will. It is defined by who rushes toward you when you're hurt instead of toward their own reputation, who will risk being the difficult one if it means keeping you safe. My parents, my sister, and my nephew showed me exactly who they were when they chose a stream of rental income and social standing over my son's bruised face. I believed them. I also believed the people who stepped in, when my relatives stepped back, Kelsey with her lists, and late-night pep talks, Logan with his tools, and steady presence, Dr. Boyd, with her willingness to file reports and keep showing up anyway. Those are the people I count as my family now, and I am done apologizing for drawing that line. I wish I could tell you I forgave my parents and sister, that one day we all sat down and hashed it out and found a way forward. That might make for a neat movie ending. But in real life, sometimes the healthiest thing you can do for yourself and your child is shut a door and never reopen it. I will never send Ethan back into a room where someone he loves might stand by and let him be hurt to protect their ego or bank account. I will never lend them money, attend their gatherings, or let their emergencies become mine. Ethan knows that if they ever show up at his school or our properties, he has a whole web of adults, teachers, neighbors, staff ready to step in. The lesson I took from all of this is simple. Even if living it isn't, blood does not entitle anyone to your loyalty when they have proven they will use it against you. If you're listening to this and recognizing your own family and mine, hear me when I say this: you are allowed to walk away, and you do not owe abusers another chance just because you share a last name. Thank you for listening to my story. Share your thoughts below. What would you do in my place?